Everybody, some believe a company's safety culture lies in the relationship between the frontline employee, the employee's immediate supervisor, and the bond among the team. No senior level initiative, safety department compliance measures, or culture improvement ideas will have the impact a frontline supervisor has in establishing trusted working relationships. The frontline supervisor, the tipping point, some believe, between safety compliance and workplace safety success. Do you agree or disagree? William Hendrickson believes this is so. Please welcome William, Managing Director at DuPont Sustainable Solutions. William, we're bringing you up onto the big stage, and I know you like to go by Bill. So, Bill, welcome to the main stage here. Great to have you with us. So really great to have you. Bill, first question, where are you calling in from today?
Orlando, Florida, Tim.
Orlando, Florida. Must be nice and warm there and a great place to visit in those winter months and keeping everybody happy during those winter blues. Bill, great to have you with us. A quick question before we begin. How would you say your role has changed in the last 18 months, and how did you go about that transformational change that you needed to go through in order to change your role?
Yes, for sure. It's been challenging for everybody. I think the key was a lot of what we're going to talk about today, engaging people and communicating really well through this time and getting people very focused on the values that we're trying to lead and getting through this from a business perspective. So it's engagement and communication has been the key.
Yeah, and the communication part has been some of the more challenging aspects of this, in that we've been working remotely and making sure that you're reaching these teams, reaching your employees, and getting that engagement. Bill, I know you have a lot to get to. I'm going to give you the floor in a moment. I want to remind everybody we can bring you right up here on stage for questions. We're going to give you that opportunity in just a little while. But Bill, I know you have a presentation for us. So Bill, floor is yours.
Excellent. So a lot about what I'm going to speak about today is a great build upon what we just heard, which was a great session. Let's start off with, let's get started. I mean, today I'm going to discuss really what frontline leadership excellence looks like in safety cultures that apply a human touch to really influence, coach, and inspire teams. It's in our experience, we've seen the greatest success when the frontline leaders buy into safety as a personal value, and they truly understand their role in keeping the workforce and their team safe. In fact, teams themselves can become the safety leaders when companies get that right. The need for the safety functional people inspecting, auditing can really be diminished, and you can get away from a rules-based enforcement to a human touch, highly engaged, performance-based safety culture. All right, so with that, sorry about that. I love to really then get going around sharing some best practices. So if you don't mind, go to the chat room and put in one or two things your frontline leaders that you're doing to really have a positive difference in driving safety culture and performance. I'll give a moment or two, and then you can do that throughout the presentation. So one or two things, share some best practices with everybody of what your frontline leaders are doing to drive the safety culture and performance in your business. So really, we believe and have seen the frontline leaders are the safety culture. Individual contributor to leader and competing priorities is a big deal. Shifting the mindsets from compliance to risk, getting to the why, being a center of influence, positive communication, coaching, and leveraging data analytics are some of the things we're going to speak to today. But let's start with, there's an unofficial rule of safety management that goes like this. A safety program will only be as strong as its least effective frontline leader. Every rule has its exceptions, but this is exceedingly difficult to achieve safety success in a workplace where frontline leaders lack the skills, the will, and the knowledge to drive and support the company's safety vision and its efforts. So what's the challenge? It's a big challenge. It's a big challenge for every one of our clients. So while some organizations do have some frontline leaders very much on board, when it comes to this critical role in the business, it's vital that all of them need to be on board. Most frontline leaders ascend to their positions by virtue of being the most senior person or have the most technical skills. They typically don't have management or leadership skills, yet they're the ones. They're the ones in charge at the front lines at the point of execution. They're the ones who are supposed to keep the team together, keep them motivated, focused, make the right decisions, keep the team safe. The frontline leaders need the personal skills to be the center of influence in this scenario. They need to be thinking, what can I bring to the job that helps the new guy from getting hurt and others getting hurt? We see too often that the frontline leader is armed with rule books, procedures, binders, sometimes some apps in a more innovative way. And they don't need safety police looking over their shoulder while they lead teams in the work. The challenge, the reality is, there are a lot of competing business priorities that the frontline leader deals with on a daily basis. Frontline leaders typically make up 40% of the managerial population in an organization. Preparing them to lead effectively is essential. And we have found approximately 60% of frontline leaders never receive training in their first leadership role. And it starts with culture. Negative cultures absolutely put workers under pressure to ignore safety rules, do the right thing, and in order to deliver their task on time. This is just one of the things that the frontline leader deals with on a daily basis. So let's talk about where they are in position, right? This is about leading work at the point of execution. You know, the frontline leaders may not set the organizational direction, but they're the ones ultimately responsible for translating the company's safety policies and intentions into action. Simply put, the frontline leaders are where the rubber meets the road. The frontline leaders drive the work on the ground and should be focused not on safety, but on proactive risk reduction exposure. They understand that risk reduction exposure, not injury, is the best indicator of safety performance. They enable their teams to recognize when risk exposure is changing and take action to eliminate those risks in real time. They feel empowered to stop work. But unfortunately, we have found only 32% on average in organizations feel truly empowered to take action in safety. The great leaders also actively ensure alignment between teams and any contractors. Many times they may be working side by side with contractors. They address the issue of contractors in a simple and direct way. They treat contractors like everyone else. They take the position that a human life, regardless of the badge you may wear, is sacred. This is another example of why we believe the human touch element is critical and necessary in this frontline leader role. Safety must be built into the job site, and the frontline leader is the quarterback. So what's the truth? The frontline leaders deal with many competing priorities on a daily basis. You know, safety relies in the relationship between that frontline worker, the frontline leader, and the bond that's with the whole entire team. No senior level initiative, safety department compliance measures, as we heard, or culture improvement ideas can have positive results if the frontline leader hasn't established a real trusted working relationship with his team. When companies provide training to their frontline leader in order to develop the necessary skills to accomplish this, many fail. Many fail to not recognize and addressing the key dynamics in play on every day of the frontline leader's life. They fail because the frontline leader rarely gets a chance to deploy any of the training or practice any of the required skills due to competing priorities and other factors. We have found, on average, the frontline leader only spends 10 to 15% of his time or her time actively supervising, coaching, and leading the work of the teams in the field. And this is some of our findings. On the left-hand side is basically an average of the composite of many, many years of what we call day in the life studies with frontline leaders. So where we document every 5 minutes, every 10 minutes of what they do and what barriers that come through their day. And you can see the yellow is really administration. We continue decade over decade, as much as I've been seeing it, put 28 on average, the 30% on average administrative work on that frontline leader. We throw in another 15% on meetings and there's some available time, you're looking at over 55% of a frontline leader's time to spend in meetings and admin and available. You can see only 11% is actively supervising, leading, engaging the work. You throw in 4 or 5% around coaching and training and driving some of the compliance and safety things that have to happen. And 10% of it is they haven't made a great transition. They're still jumping in and doing manual work. They haven't bridged that gap. So our best practice that most clients strive toward is on the right-hand side. 55% of their time needs to be actively engaged, leading the teams, coaching the teams, and supervising the work. Throw in another 15% on being proactive around safety and the compliance issues, and really shrink the meetings and administrative time. Take that burden off their plate. Passive supervision can still be there as they're moving from crew to crew along, but they need to be taught how to better engage and intervene, and the manual work has to go away. And this is kind of like our baseline of our findings. So you can put all the training in place and expect a different result from your frontline leaders, but until you address the current state that they typically operate in to give them the time to be successful, you won't get the results. So learnings from coaching over 1 million frontline leaders is the next topic. And what I'll do is basically just give a few points, and then we'll get into a number of key things. So the illusion of compliance jumps out at us is, some organizations believe that having EH&S systems on paper available to frontline leaders and workers is satisfactory for compliance, protection, and success. This, of course, is incorrect. They have to be understood, clear, not over-engineered. We see still too much over-engineering of things. They've got to be implemented and ultimately consistently executed in practice in the field. The organizations that believe the important job is once the safety system's designed, the documents are uploaded to the corporate database, and the actual implementation then takes time, and it'll just happen by that frontline leader. I can't tell you how many times, 8 out of 10 times when I first engage with a client, they want to first tell me how great they have all these systems and processes and procedures and rules on paper. But the reality is, as we just saw, it's got to be executed at the point of execution in the field effectively and consistently. They all miss the change management aspect, and they typically all fail. So now with that, we'll share some lessons we've learned over the past 53 years. Number one, the transition from an individual contributor to a leader is the first hurdle to get over. It seems like a natural progression. A person has crushed it. It's been safe as an individual contributor for years. So the next step is leadership, correct? Well, not necessarily what we've seen. Truthfully, there's little that's natural to it at all about this transition. Odds are the expertise, the skills that made the person a great individual contributor is necessarily not what they need at the next level of leadership. Having someone in your organization promoted in leadership is a great thing. For the first time, it should be exciting for them. Their skills, dedication should be recognized, and they begin a responsibility to lead others. It's a big step, but it also can be intimidating for them. They have to quickly get up to speed. They need to find the time to acquire vital new skills now, as we saw that transition from the pie chart. They've got to oversee and direct work and safety of the entire team, do new tasks. And the most important thing, stop doing many tasks they used to do. So our experience on what contributes to a worker's bad day at work, top 5 issues really could be tied back to ineffective frontline leadership. The lack of help and support from my direct boss. That's the coaching aspect. You've got to give them the time and train them to do more coaching. Negative coworkers. Well, there's your culture and your teamwork. It's so important. Lack of praise or recognition for the work I do. This is huge. We always find this in organizations, and it isn't about giving them a gift card to a restaurant, but you have to understand in this role about recognizing people. Uncertainty about the workplace vision or strategy. That's the importance we talked about. It's the communications skills and be able to constantly communicate. And the high workload. Well, that's just better planning and leading the team. So this transition is critical to get right from the get-go. So because workers take clues from those frontline leaders. They have the critical role of driving your safety culture. So where is the best place to start? Once they've made that transition, is finding common ground. We see this as a best practice. You know, cultures shape our view of the world as individuals and as society. Our ideas, attitudes, behaviors, thought processes, and personal identity are all rooted in culture. Furthermore, cultures learn and evolve through a constant process of evaluation, adaptation, and innovation. The workplace is no different than the rest of the world. Culture differences exist and can significantly impact employee expectations, job performance, and outcomes. Leading a workforce that includes people from diverse culture backgrounds and languages can be a challenge. We see it all the time, especially out in the field, different languages. They have to be able to deal with this. So what do they have to do? They've got to be able to understand social intelligence. It's a key trait required for an effective frontline leader. Fundamentally, that means it's the ability to find common ground with individuals, rally around a common purpose, gain alignment on being safe to achieve desired outcomes. So finding common ground with individuals as a frontline leader and the teams themselves is a critical success factor for frontline leadership. So then you get to the why. This is a big, important thing to focus in on when you're a frontline leader and get your frontline leaders to understand this. So frontline leaders must understand and believe, effectively communicate the why, your company's why. Why is the most important question in life. When you ask why, when it comes to safety, you're exploring the purpose of its importance. So what makes a frontline leader care? The human touch. To be successful driving safety in the workforce. It's because their boss told them to do it. You heard it from the CEO at a town hall? No. The successful frontline leader demonstrates that human touch, the care from the value for safety. They need to be able to connect it to the organization and themselves personally. It's darn near impossible to succeed at anything without first exploring the reasons for doing something. So why safety and why does it matter to me is key for a frontline leader to understand. So then they're armed and ready to lead from the front. We've all heard it, right? The best leaders lead from the front. Well, this concept is really easy to misinterpret, what we've seen with clients. If you think about your career and the people you've seen in the midst of chaos up front, working right alongside with the rest of the team, they're mostly, ultimately, the most ineffective leaders. They were the ones who seemed the most comfortable actually still doing that work, still holding on to that 10% of that manual work as a frontline leader, then transitioning to leading the team. They tend to get mired in the details, micromanage, and still miss that opportunity to see the bigger picture, which is so important as they're overseeing the crews in safety. In short, they're running as managers and not leaders. They believe their role is to manage the people. They just do it from the front. That's not what leading from the front means. Leading from the front means being visible and engaging at the front while still being able to see the forest through the trees. It's all a matter of perspective. So leading from the front doesn't always mean the frontline leader runs in first. The lead from the front with a human touch is what we call felt leadership. So the next time you hear someone talking about leading from the front, remember that the front is often a matter of perspective. Influencing and role modeling then is key. Once everybody's looking up to the frontline leader, we do see it, unfortunately, still an underreporting of safety issues within organizations. And that's easy to shift the blame to the frontline workers. But our data suggests that the exact opposite might be happening in your organization. Our experience has found approximately 28% of frontline leaders chose not to report at least one safety incident a year. So when evaluating your organization's safety culture, how can your workers be expected to adhere to optimal levels of safety if the leaders themselves they look up to aren't demonstrating the right behaviors. Even if the frontline leaders are verbalizing the importance of safety, we see that a lot, right? It's their behaviors that truly have an impact on the worker safety habits. It all comes down to the impact of behavioral role modeling. To be an effective workplace safety role model, that frontline leader needs to actively demonstrate how much value and importance positive safety behaviors and values. Regardless of the circumstances at hand, they need to always demonstrate the desired safety behaviors to give the team a positive role model to follow. We know it's what people see that counts. So positive communications, there's a lot here, right? But I'll keep it simple. You know, affective is getting to the heart, effective is getting to the head, the mind. So when a frontline leader is seeking for a desired effect, they should be trying to achieve a desired effect. They need to communicate in every interaction to reach people on that emotional human level. This is the human touch element we've talked about. Communications is critical. So with that, we'll see an example of a frontline supervision interaction.
So how do you think it went?
I thought it went really well. So what's wrong?
I totally blew a coaching opportunity with one of my employees today. It was painful, I'm telling you, for both of us.
Probably wasn't as bad as you think it was.
Yeah, well, the worst thing is I know better.
So what happened?
This morning, all right, I noticed Frank. You know Frank. He's backing a service vehicle into place, and so I'm going to go thank him, and I'm going to tell him, hey, you know, good job being proactive. But then I see he's not wearing his safety glasses, so I yell at him instead. I tell him all the things he's doing wrong.
Well, so now you know what you can do better next time.
Yeah, but that's not all, though. I was not in the right frame of mind even before I talked to Frank. Jeanette and I had a fight this morning right before I came in. So I was on edge from that, and my mind wasn't in the right place, you know?
So what could you do in the future to prevent something like that from happening again?
I don't know. I mean, I guess I could take some time and de-stress before coming into work. Try to flush all the stuff that happened between me and Jeanette.
Sounds like a good plan.
Yeah, the worst part is this. So Frank comes to me yesterday with an idea for a new barricade. And I just tell him, well, that's not gonna work, and I walk away because I was so busy. And here I am, I'm telling everybody on my team, I want you guys to step up and give me ideas to help improve things.
So what could you do differently?
Well, I could have listened to him, let him know that I value his ideas and I appreciate him stepping up. I really blew it. I should have given him a touch point just for coming up with a new idea.
Well, you know, it's not too late. I mean, you could still tell him whatever you're telling me right now. I mean, we're all human.
Yeah. You know, you're right. It might take a little while to earn back his trust, but that's the right thing to do.
An opportunity to turn a negative to a positive.
Well, the opportunity to do what I should have done in the first place. I need to take time to pause before I do anything, you know? Slow down, think about what I want to accomplish in each conversation. I gotta process before I do anything. Think about not just what I'm gonna say, but how I'm gonna say it. And then, and only when I really know what I want to accomplish, then I can proceed. Which in this case is to follow up with Frank and apologize. And I better do it quick because I don't want him to think I don't appreciate him or him trying to help.
You're better at this than you think you are.
Thanks. And thanks for thinking through this with me. Hey, is that a touch point?
I think it is.
That's all right.
Right. There's a lot of lessons that you can take from that video, and I hope that helped a few people. So with that, it gets back into intervening. Intervening is exactly what you saw there. The frontline leaders should intervene when they see situations that are unsafe and see others engaged in unsafe behaviors. This is something touted as a very progressive position by many organizations to assure health and safety of their employees. In theory, it's great, but in practice, it may not be effective as desired, as you saw. There's no question frontline leaders know the difference between right and wrong. So why do we sometimes find intervening, really at-risk behaviors not happening? So there's several factors may influence whether the frontline leader intervenes and effectively intervenes. The company's culture, safety climate needs to make them feel safe to intervene. Speak up, train them on effective communication skills, and use the time as a coaching moment. You need to keep it positive, as we just saw. Body language and tone play a big factor in positive safety intervention. Interventions are meant to help and maintain a safe environment. Avoid criticism and discipline in the intervention, as they may face resistance and ultimately discourage future interventions. We have found, on average, only 26% of people in organizations believe safety rules are enforced. When a team sees unsafe behaviors not being addressed at the leadership level, it creates a precedent that is how did these situations are addressed, thus setting the standard and defining the safety culture for everyone. So we've seen things rally around see, say, and do. As you saw, you see something, what concerns you, and then have some good conversations to come up with potential solutions. This is a good example. So learning from the past is the next thing a frontline leader needs to really understand. You know, there's an old saying that goes something like this: no experiences are bad. Some are good, others are lessons. So hindsight is 2020, because with awareness and planning, incidents could have been prevented. We have found on average only 43% of people in organizations believe all injuries can be prevented. It's the belief. Leading companies are at 95%. So here are some afterthoughts which we've seen. That's how we've always done it before. This is right before the accident occurred anyway. I never thought a little bolt from that distance would cause so much bleeding. I guess I should have worn my hard hat. I know we're always preaching that we should lift with our leg muscles instead of our back muscles. So what the heck is a herniated disc? For a few more dollars, I could have brought safety shoes. That deep cut in my toe section ruined my new work boots, and this broken toe still hurts. I hope some of these may not sound familiar, but they probably are familiar with you. They say hindsight is the perfect science, but foresight could have avoided these incidents, misfortunes, and regrets. So learning from the past when you're a frontline leader, really recognizing potential hazards and prepare themselves and their teams to provide protection against those hazards in the future is critical. With that, leveraging data and analytics. So businesses run on data, in many ways, so does safety. Once best practices have been codified, the safety management system's up and running, how that system is functioning and what changes are needed to shift workplace realities. And that means a relatively high volume of good quality information needs to be collected about safety. Even though safety data is mostly analyzed at the management level, it's often gathered on the shop floor and needs to be shared with the frontline leader. I'm not just talking about lagging indicators, but leading indicators and analytics.
I don't know if he's saying that.
So a set of questions can illustrate just how effective workplace is in collecting, leveraging data at the frontline leader level. How willing are employees to report near misses? Are the barriers in the reporting structure? Is the data shared in near real time with that frontline leader and worker? Is the data used to understand vulnerabilities, future vulnerabilities? So frontline leaders are in the center of these questions. They can facilitate robust data collection, reporting, and improvements, or they could be a roadblock. So frontline leaders are in the center of these questions that they have to get right and be engaged and make that a critical part of their role. The dramatic effect that they can have on the quality of the safety data is also clear. They need to turn those decisions made at the point of execution into fact-based with data. So ultimately, leveraging technology, as we heard earlier, companies need to have connected and protected frontline workers and leadership. So ultimately, the term winning hearts and minds is well known. It's a well-known strategy used by the military. The complexity of a hearts and minds approach in business is dependent on an organization's EH&S maturity and culture. The simple rules of frontline leader: get alignment and engagement from the people and get them aligned to what you believe in. Leaders know safety success is not management systems, policies, it's about employee engagement. There's no doubt employees will only get engaged if they feel the work environment enables them to openly participate. The challenge for any organization and a frontline leader is to create the conditions that will enable engagement to happen in a proactive manner, shifting people's mindsets. Empowerment, engagement, encouragement, those are key. Frontline leaders who care about safety of people and visibly demonstrate a caring attitude will ultimately gain their respect and trust of their teams. They will be viewed as true leaders in the business, inspiring others to be motivated to perform at the best of their abilities, be safe, and win their hearts and minds. So Paul O'Neill's tenure as the helm of Alcoa is now stuff of legendary proportions. When he first was introduced to a group of investors way back in 1987, he didn't talk about revenue, expenses, and earnings. He told them, I want to talk to you about worker safety. Every year, numerous Alcoa employees were injured so badly they missed a day of work. He continued on and said, our safety record is better than the general American workforce, but that's not good enough. I intend to make Alcoa the safest company in America. I intend to go for zero injuries. The emphasis on safety made a dramatic impact in the business over his tenure. By the time he retired in 2000, Alcoa dropped from 1.86 lost workdays to injury per 100 workers to 0.2. And the business performance came with that. The annual net income was 5 times higher, and the market capitalization grew by $27 billion. So we really believe organizations that put this out there with their frontline leaders to really lead with the safety, operational discipline will ultimately have the business results, and you don't compromise production or operations over safety. So with that, that's what I've got for you today, and I guess we can take some questions.
Bill, thank you so much, and such a great presentation. We appreciate all the insight that you delivered there. Bill, I do know we've got some questions, so we're going to bring them up onto the stage with us so that they can ask their question live. First up, Tony at Lind. Tony, welcome to the main stage, to the conversation. Once we get Tony up here, we're just waiting for Tony to be brought up there. No worries. There we go. Tony, good to see you. Welcome to the main stage here. Tony, I know you have a question for Bill, so Tony, floor is yours. Oh, Tony's on mute. Tony, I think you're on mute. That's the phrase of the past 18 months. There you go, Tony. We got you now.
The most common phrase. You're right. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I just did that to help everyone else on the call.
There you go.
Yeah. Bill, thank you for the presentation. That video really reminded me of the difference between respond and react, and where we should be, which is in respond mode. So thank you. My question's on your data between the best practice and normal practice. Actually, I have 2 questions. The first question is, what results change have you seen from those companies that exhibited the best practices versus the normal practice? And then the second question is, would it be possible for me to get a copy of this presentation, including the video? Thank you very much.
Yes, Tony. I think I heard your question correctly. It's what typical results we're finding with clients if they get most of all this right. Is that your question, Tony? Yeah, we see 60% improvement in their safety performance. And I think, again, that's a lagging indicator and that's looking back. What we see is the shift in the culture. When we go out and do those day in life studies, even when we come back 6 months later after an engagement, you just see and feel the difference. You see the leadership at the front line, the engagement, and you just see focus and not a lot of burdensome, like I said, about extra procedures. You just see how it's more streamlined, more focused, and the results are there because you just see an engaged workforce. I mean, it's something that we measure against their culture to their injury rate. It gets back to our DuPont Bradley curve. It's moving them from a reactive or independent stage to really interdependent, where they care about themselves and others versus just following the rules. So it's a combination of the results ultimately that are tremendous, but then you just see the shift in the culture.
Bill, thank you for that. And Tony, as to your second question, we're going to collect all of the presentations that our presenters are willing to share, and we're going to make sure that everybody gets those presentations when the summit concludes. So, Tony, thanks so much for your question. We appreciate it. We'll see you again over the next couple of days. I know we have another question for Bill O'Neill from HSI coming up onto the main stage in just a moment to ask his question. And we'll see O'Neill. There he is. O'Neill, welcome to you. Great to have you here on the main stage. I know you have a question for Bill, so please, floor is yours.
I do. Thanks, Bill. I wanted to get your perspective on what role you think recognition and rewards plays in assisting frontline leaders to create a better safety culture. And if you have examples of companies that have done it well that you can share.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And if we think of our survey we've been running for years, it always, even leading companies struggle with that one. It's probably the top two that they really struggle with. You know, there's a lot of discussion always around, like I mentioned in the presentation, monetary stuff, gift card and things like that. People try that. I don't think that has the lift and the impact that you need. I think what we talked about here, this human touch and about making that connection to hearts and minds, it's tied to the communications, recognizing, taking the time, even as a frontline leader in a shift, beginning of a shift meeting, calling out and recognizing somebody in front of the rest of their team. I think just that connection, that constant communication, recognizing people's a big deal. And there is one thing around the celebration part of it. We do see some best practices where they'll have a barbecue or they'll have something, but it's really tied into the whole, the team, the overall team success of recognition. But the way to get to an individual is you just got to recognize it. It's a communication thing, and that's what you should do as a frontline leader. And every point you can, just thank you to them, recognize them. It's that connection that's made that people really, really need from a human perspective, and it seems to have the best impact.
O'Neill, thank you so much for your question there. We appreciate it. I know we're going to see you over the next couple of days with more questions and comments and some insights. So, O'Neill, thank you so much for that. We appreciate it. I know we've got one more question for you, Bill. Sitar from Contour Global coming up onto the main stage to ask you a question. Sitar, welcome to you. Welcome to the main stage. Please go ahead and ask your question to Bill.
Yeah, hi, Bill. It's Per here. I'm coming from heavy industry power generation. And with our teams, we're relatively light staffed at your average power plant. So your frontline leader has a laundry list of responsibilities, from operations to maintenance to contractor oversight. I'm curious, have you and your team looked at what mechanisms we can empower our frontline leaders with in terms of standardizing their daily work so they can make the right time to engage with our employees, demonstrate those behaviors? That teaching moment you shared, we call it felt leadership, where we engage with our employees. For me, it's a hurdle to get them out of the office. Are there any tricks of the trade or I don't know, thoughts that you may be able to share with me and my peers on the call?
Yeah, I'll try to think of some good practices. It's a great question. You really got to the heart of the whole thing, like I mentioned. you could have pie in the sky ideas, but unless you look at those 2 pie charts I showed and know how to get those right. And then there's still the design of the future state, which you described, where you want them to spend their time. You still got to execute and get that right. I personally started my career in the power utility industry at Florida Power and Light. So I've been there, and I was out in the field early in my career, designing substations and things like that. And I saw the frontline leader in action. So I was very young and saw this years ago. And here's the challenge. A lot of it still exists today. And we're talking 33 years ago. So what we do with clients typically is you got to get the good baseline. You mentioned all the things that are happening, and think of the pie chart, all the responsibilities and all the things. And we basically would do that day in life study if you haven't done those. And it isn't really trying to categorize where the time is to put it into colors, but to capture everything they're doing. And then most importantly, what's getting in their way? So how do you free them up? As you described, they need more time to focus on the right things. So the clients really do a great job of just baselining that role and then designing the future role, and just being able to say no or stop in some things, and just redesign that role and find other people in the business to pick up some of that. So I just don't know what the pie chart looks like, but if it's what we find, 28% of the time is spent in administrative work, another 15 in meetings, you got to focus on that and ask the why again and challenge that. So the best practices are the ones that really do it from a data perspective. They kind of know and live the day in the life of people and see what's going on and removing those barriers. And then it's back to, again, communication, and trust, and working them through. This is your role. This is what we expect. And you got to support them. If they do stop doing something, you got to support them. And if they're and get the behaviors focused on where you want them to spend their time. There's some examples, but I think that the key is you mentioned all those things. Where are they really spending their time? Are they just in the culture of firefighting, and that's just dragging them down? I mean, it's got to get to the culture, their role, and communicate to them the expectations. If that helps.
Much appreciated, Bill. Thank you.
Yeah.
Sater, thank you so much for your question. And Bill, I know we've got one more, about another minute, and I wanted to ask you a question. You mentioned the negative impact of a negative worker on a team. And, that really can bring the morale down when you have a negative coworker. Debbie Downer, Donnie Downer every day. What's some advice on how these leaders can talk to that person about that, and how do you change someone from being a negative person into a positive person?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, it's not so easy, is it? I think it gets rooted back into the culture, and I think it's the time spent with that individual. Back to that time coaching, and it's got to just be a way where they can find that common ground with that person, even where there's differences in alignment. And that's the skills that a frontline leader needs in order to then consistently support them as they're starting to make the change. And not everybody's going to make it, in some cases. That's unfortunate, right? But if you're going to try to go with the glass half full with somebody from a development standpoint and get that negative behavior right, you've got to address it. You've got to address it up front in a way that isn't harsh, like we talked about. It's tone, it's about coaching, it's about how we can help you. And then yourself as a frontline leader, you can't fall back into what we saw and just talked about, yourself not demonstrating the right behavior. Because if you tell them to do this type of behavior, then you're not doing it. Like we talked about, frontline leaders the workforce looks up to the frontline leaders. So you got to be consistent yourself to demonstrate it, and then you can bring them along, I think is key.
A lot of great learnings here, especially how to be a great leader, one of our themes here this week. And so, Bill, we appreciate you being here. Appreciate your presentation and all the insights that you shared here. Bill, thank you so much, and say hello to Orlando
Excellent.
for us. We appreciate you being here for us.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.